What began as a small platform in London in 2016 quickly became one of the most controversial internet empires of the modern age. OnlyFans was marketed as a creator-first service, a place where artists, fitness coaches, and entertainers could directly earn from their fans. But what catapulted the site into global fame wasn't art or fitness, it was explicit content. By 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, OnlyFans became a billion-dollar juggernaut celebrated for turning ordinary people into overnight millionaires. Yet behind this glossy success story lies a darker narrative that the company has desperately tried to keep hidden. Investigations from major news outlets have revealed loopholes that allowed minors to slip through the cracks, money to be laundered across borders, and criminal networks to flourish under the guise of creator freedom. On top of that, the very creators who built the platform have accused it of unfair treatment, sudden account suspensions, and withheld earnings. Governments, banks, and watchdogs are now circling, raising questions that go far beyond one company's scandal. What started as a symbol of empowerment has morphed into a lightning rod for some of the most pressing debates about exploitation morality and corporate responsibility in the digital age. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the rise and scandals of OnlyFans and expose the hidden cracks that could one day bring the empire to its knees. When OnlyFans launched in 2016, it was intended to be a niche subscription-based platform where fans could directly support their favorite creators. Founded by Tim Stokely in London, the site was built on a simple idea: remove the middleman and let creators take home most of their earnings while fans pay a small monthly fee for exclusive content. At first, the vision wasn't so different from platforms like Patreon. Early users included fitness coaches, musicians, and lifestyle influencers who wanted to monetize their fan base without relying on advertising or sponsorships. But the turning point came when adult performers discovered the platform's potential. Unlike traditional adult entertainment companies that controlled distribution and revenue, OnlyFans allowed creators to own their content, set their own subscription prices, and keep up to 80% of the income. This shift was revolutionary, and word spread quickly. By 2018, adult entertainers had essentially taken over the site, redefining its identity and making it synonymous with explicit content. The timing of this shift couldn't have been more strategic. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, millions of people around the world lost their jobs and were forced into lockdowns. For many, OnlyFans presented itself as an economic lifeline. Young people, often without other income, began joining in droves, marketing themselves to global audiences, hungry for both entertainment and intimacy during isolation. Media headlines began declaring the platform a financial savior, celebrating stories of ordinary people suddenly making 6 or even 7 figures. It was empowerment wrapped in digital convenience, at least on the surface. Celebrities joining OnlyFans only added fuel to the fire. Stars like Bella Thorne, Cardi B, and Tyga jumped on the platform, legitimizing it in the eyes of mainstream audiences. The site was no longer a fringe corner of the internet, but a global cultural phenomenon. By the end of 2022, OnlyFans reported paying out over $2 billion to creators, and it boasted more than 100 million registered users. The brand positioned itself as the future of the creator economy, a phrase that suggested empowerment, independence, and democratized fame. But with explosive growth came enormous problems. The influx of millions of new users strained the company's ability to verify identities and police content. What was once a small platform suddenly found itself sitting on a volcano of legal, financial, and ethical dilemmas. Banks and payment processors like Visa and MasterCard began scrutinizing the company, worried about fraud and illicit activity. At the same time, journalists and advocacy groups started investigating whether the company's rapid growth had allowed serious violations such as underage accounts, and unregulated financial flows to slip through. The public perception of OnlyFans also began to split. Some praised it as a groundbreaking tool that gave sex workers and entertainers unprecedented control over their income. Others condemned it as a system that preyed on desperation, exploiting vulnerable people while hiding behind the illusion of empowerment. Behind the scenes, regulators and law enforcement agencies quietly kept watch, waiting for cracks in the empire to show. What started as a bold experiment in digital monetization had quickly morphed into a billion-dollar powerhouse. Yet, as history has shown with countless corporations, before rapid success often leaves behind a trail of overlooked responsibilities and buried scandals. OnlyFans had become a household name, but it was also becoming a target. And soon, the first major scandal would erupt, shaking the foundation of the empire and revealing the dangers of unchecked growth in the digital age. As OnlyFans rose to mainstream dominance, one of the most explosive scandals that emerged was tied to something the company should have been most vigilant about: protecting minors from entering the platform. By design, OnlyFans required creators to submit identification before earning money. In theory, this was supposed to ensure that only adults could create and sell content. But as journalists and advocacy groups began digging deeper, it became clear that the verification system was far from airtight. In 2021, a BBC investigation sent shockwaves across the world when it revealed multiple cases of underage users who had managed to create accounts, sell explicit content, and earn thousands of dollars before being discovered. Some of these accounts reportedly used stolen IDs or manipulated the upload process to trick the system. In one particularly disturbing case, a 17-year-old girl was able to sell explicit videos of herself for months before moderators took action. The revelations ignited fury not only from the public, but also from regulators who questioned whether OnlyFans was turning a blind eye to underage exploitation in order to keep its growth numbers rising. The Financial Times followed up with its own reporting, noting how gaps in the moderation process left room for illegal material to slip through. Internal documents obtained by journalists suggested that moderators were underpaid, overworked, and expected to review thousands of pieces of content each day. Some whistleblowers even alleged that management pressured staff to be lenient with creators who were profitable, raising disturbing questions about whether the company prioritized revenue over safety. For an industry already facing criticism for its handling of consent and exploitation, these allegations became a bombshell. Regulators around the world began to take notice. In the United States, child protection agencies expressed concern about the possibility of human trafficking networks exploiting the platform. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation labeled OnlyFans a major risk and urged lawmakers to intervene. In the United Kingdom, where the company is headquartered, politicians demanded answers on how such violations could have occurred under supposedly strict identity checks. The European Union also raised alarms, with some officials calling for greater regulation of online adult platforms as a whole. The scandal wasn't just about underage creators, it extended to the disturbing possibility of non-consensual content being sold. Victims of revenge porn and trafficking began coming forward, claiming their images had been uploaded to OnlyFans without permission. The site critics argued lacked robust mechanisms for victims to report and remove stolen content. In some cases, removal requests allegedly went unanswered for weeks or months, leaving victims powerless while their trauma generated profit. The financial world responded swiftly to these revelations. Major payment processors like Visa and MasterCard had already faced criticism for handling transactions linked to adult content, and now they were under pressure to distance themselves from OnlyFans. In August 2021, the company stunned the world by announcing it would ban explicit sexual content entirely. a move that appeared to be driven by banking partners' concerns over illegal activity. The decision caused outrage among creators who relied on the platform for their livelihood, and within days, OnlyFans reversed its ban. The sudden U-turn revealed just how fragile the company's relationship with financial institutions had become, and how close it had come to losing its entire business model. The scandal permanently altered the way OnlyFans was viewed. What had once been celebrated as a beacon of financial freedom now looked like a company caught in a dangerous balancing act, profiting from adult content while struggling to control the darker elements that came with it. For many critics, the underage allegations were proof that the platform's rapid growth had outpaced its ability to police itself. For others, it was a wake-up call about the risks of monetizing intimacy in an unregulated digital marketplace. Behind closed doors, OnlyFans scrambled to repair its reputation. The company claimed to invest millions into AI-based content, scanning hire more moderators, and strengthen ID verification. But trust had already been damaged. Advocacy groups insisted the measures were reactive, not proactive, too little too late, after real harm had already been done. Families of victims who had been exploited on the site continued to press for accountability, arguing that no amount of technological patches could undo the trauma already inflicted. For users and creators, the scandal raised haunting questions. If a platform this massive could allow minors and non-consensual content to slip through, what else might be hiding beneath the surface? The incident made clear that OnlyFans was no longer just a trendy app. It was a battleground for issues of legality, morality, and corporate accountability. And as the controversy intensified, another scandal began to surface, one that threatened not only the company's reputation, but the very financial foundation it stood on: allegations of money laundering and ties to international crime. If the underage content scandal painted OnlyFans as careless, the allegations of money laundering and shady financial flows painted it as complicit in something far darker. By 2021, global investigators and financial watchdogs began to notice irregularities in how money moved through the platform. At its core, OnlyFans relied on massive daily transactions between millions of fans and creators. This system, while lucrative, created a perfect environment for suspicious activity to hide in plain sight. Reports surfaced that organized crime groups may have used the platform to launder illicit funds by posing as creators. In this scheme, criminals could set up accounts, upload minimal or fake content, and funnel dirty money by subscribing to their own channels using stolen or compromised credit cards. To outsiders, the money looked like legitimate subscription revenue. Once cashed out, the laundered funds entered the global banking system with the stamp of legitimacy. Financial analysts warned that the sheer volume of small transactions made it difficult to track or flag suspicious activity in real time, giving criminals a convenient laundering vehicle. Law enforcement agencies in Europe and North America began raising alarms. In the United Kingdom, where OnlyFans is headquartered, regulators demanded greater transparency from the company's financial operations. The U.S. Treasury Department also began monitoring, citing concerns that the platform could be exploited by traffickers and cybercriminals. While no direct evidence surfaced that the company itself orchestrated laundering, critics pointed out that its weak oversight allowed bad actors to flourish unchecked. The controversy intensified when whistleblowers claimed that certain creators were cashing out sums vastly disproportionate to their activity on the site. According to some insiders, these accounts showed little to no genuine fan interaction, yet they were withdrawing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Was this creative entrepreneurship or money laundering hiding under the radar? For regulators, the answer seemed increasingly clear. Banks, already uneasy after the underage content scandal, began tightening the screws. Payment processors like Visa and MasterCard, which had briefly suspended services over compliance fears, now demanded stricter anti-money laundering (AML) protocols. Some banks even threatened to sever ties entirely, which would have crippled OnlyFans overnight. In response, the company issued statements claiming to implement advanced monitoring systems and to comply with all financial regulations. But skepticism lingered, especially given the lack of external audits or independent oversight of its financial flows. The scandal took on an international dimension when investigators linked certain suspicious accounts to criminal networks abroad. Reports emerged of accounts tied to Eastern European cybercrime groups, as well as hints that drug cartels in Latin America were exploiting the platform to clean profits. While these connections were often difficult to prove publicly, the perception alone was damaging. Headlines describing OnlyFans as a money laundering paradise spread across the globe, cementing the notion that the company was more than just a home for risque content. It was a tool in the underworld's arsenal. The irony was not lost on observers. A platform celebrated for empowering creators was now accused of empowering criminals. And while OnlyFans continued to deny wrongdoing, critics argued that its business model was fundamentally vulnerable. With millions of microtransactions happening daily, even a small percentage of illicit activity could amount to billions of dollars slipping through the cracks. Regulators demanded greater transparency, but the company remained famously secretive, controlled by its parent firm, Phoenix International, and its elusive owner, Leonid Radvinsky, who himself had faced scrutiny in the past for running adult websites linked to questionable practices. Creators, too, were caught in the crossfire. Many feared that heightened scrutiny on the platform would result in payment freezes, sudden account closures, or stricter policies that could wipe out their income overnight. For some, the mere association with money laundering allegations tarnished their work and made them targets of stigma. Others openly accused OnlyFans of hypocrisy, profiting handsomely from its lax policies, then shifting the burden onto creators when the scandals hit. What this scandal ultimately revealed was the fragile relationship between the company, the banking sector, and international regulators. OnlyFans needed banks to survive, but banks needed assurance that they weren't facilitating global crime. That uneasy balance left the platform in a constant state of negotiation, forced to appease both its creators and financial overseers while trying to maintain its billion-dollar empire. The money laundering allegations did not destroy OnlyFans, but they permanently stained its image. To critics, the platform was no longer just an adult content site. It was a potential hub of financial crime operating under the nose of global regulators. To supporters, the accusations were yet another example of the stigma faced by adult platforms used as a weapon to delegitimize an industry many wanted to erase. Yet as damaging as the allegations were, they were only one layer of the storm. Another scandal was brewing this time, involving the very people who had built the platform into a giant, the creators themselves. And their anger would expose a new wave of controversies that revealed not just corruption from the outside, but exploitation from within. While allegations of underage content and money laundering attracted government scrutiny, the most vocal and visible scandal came from within the creators themselves. Ironically, the very people who had made OnlyFans a cultural phenomenon began turning against it, accusing the company of betrayal, exploitation, and censorship. These were not isolated complaints, but a swelling wave of grievances that threatened to fracture the relationship between the platform and its lifeblood. At the heart of the outrage were stories of sudden account suspensions and withheld earnings. Creators reported logging in one day to find their profiles frozen without warning, often with thousands of dollars locked in limbo. For some, it took weeks or months to get answers, if they got any at all. Others never recovered their funds, alleging that OnlyFans quietly confiscated money under vague terms like violating community guidelines. For independent workers who relied on the platform as their main source of income, these disruptions weren't just inconvenient, they were devastating. Whole livelihoods vanished overnight with little explanation from the company. The controversy deepened in 2021 when Bella Thorne, a Hollywood actress, joined the platform and reportedly earned over $1 million in just 24 hours. While her arrival brought massive publicity, it also triggered chaos. Fans who felt misled by her non-explicit content demanded refunds en masse, leading OnlyFans to impose new limits on how much creators could charge for pay-per-view content and tips. This blanket policy punished thousands of small creators, slashing their earning potential because of one celebrity's misstep. To many, this was proof that OnlyFans prioritized famous names and profits over the community that had built its empire. Censorship was another flashpoint. As pressure from banks and regulators grew, creators noticed stricter moderation rules that often seemed arbitrary or inconsistent. Some reported that their accounts were flagged for harmless content, while others posting far riskier material were left untouched. Critics argued that the company's opaque policies disproportionately targeted marginalized groups, including LGBTQ+ creators and sex workers of color who felt silenced or pushed off the platform. For a company that had branded itself as a champion of independence and empowerment, this perceived bias struck a particularly bitter chord. Lawsuits soon followed. Groups of creators began filing legal complaints, alleging unfair treatment, lost income, and even contractual violations. The threat of collective action loomed large, raising the possibility that OnlyFans might one day face the same kind of billion-dollar class action suits that had crippled other tech giants. Advocacy organizations rallied behind the creators, demanding greater transparency, clearer guidelines, and protections for those who made the platform thrive. The backlash was not just about money or censorship, it was about betrayal. Many creators joined OnlyFans because it promised something the adult industry rarely offered: autonomy. For decades, traditional adult entertainment companies had been criticized for exploitative contracts and unsafe working conditions. OnlyFans marketed itself as the antidote, giving individuals control over their content and earnings. But as scandals mounted, creators began to feel that the promise of empowerment was a facade hiding a new kind of exploitation under the sheen of digital freedom. The revolt of creators also spilled into the public sphere. Influential figures with large followings began speaking out, exposing their experiences in viral posts and interviews. Hashtags calling for boycotts of OnlyFans trended on social media, and some creators migrated to competing platforms like Fansly and Patreon. Although none of these competitors reached the same scale, the defections revealed just how vulnerable OnlyFans was to losing the trust of its community. Without its creators, the billion-dollar empire would collapse overnight. This rebellion highlighted a broader dilemma. OnlyFans was trapped between two masters. On one side were the bank's regulators and governments demanding stricter oversight. On the other were the creators demanding freedom, fair pay, and transparency. Every concession to one side seemed to enrage the other. Banning explicit content to appease financial institutions sparked outrage among creators. Relaxing restrictions to keep creators happy invited renewed scrutiny from watchdogs. The platform had built its fortune on straddling this line, but scandals showed that the balance was increasingly unsustainable. The most devastating aspect of this scandal was not just financial loss, it was the erosion of trust. For a platform built entirely on intimate connections between creators and their fans, trust was the currency that mattered most. Once it cracked, the entire model risked collapse. And as creators continued to voice their anger, one looming question grew louder. Could OnlyFans survive if the very people who had built it now wanted to burn it down? As the revolt gathered momentum, governments and financial institutions watched closely. If the company lost its creator base, regulators would face less pressure to act. But if creators continued to be exploited while money kept pouring in, the calls for stronger intervention would only intensify. Either way, the scandal revealed a fragile empire in turmoil, and the next chapter would push the conversation beyond individual grievances to global consequences. Because what followed was not just a question of creators versus company, it was the question of whether the world itself was ready to tolerate the darker truths behind OnlyFans, and what the fallout of those truths would mean for the future of the internet economy. By the time scandals involving underage content money laundering and creator exploitation had all converged, OnlyFans was no longer just a digital platform. It had become a global flashpoint. Governments, financial institutions, advocacy groups, and everyday users were all watching, each with their own perspective on whether the site represented empowerment exploitation or something more sinister. The fallout was not confined to one country or industry. It rippled across the globe, forcing difficult questions about the future of online content, financial regulation, and digital morality. Perhaps the most immediate impact came from the financial sector. The brief but seismic moment in 2021, when OnlyFans announced then reversed its ban on explicit content, highlighted just how much power banks and payment processors wielded over the platform's survival. Visa and MasterCard had already cut ties with Pornhub the year before, citing concerns over illegal material, and many wondered whether OnlyFans would face the same fate. If mainstream payment providers abandoned the platform, its billion-dollar empire could collapse overnight. That vulnerability raised alarm bells for creators who depended on the site for income. How sustainable could an economy be if a single decision from a credit card company could erase it in an instant? Governments, too, stepped into the fray. In the United States, lawmakers began debating whether adult content platforms should face stricter federal oversight. Some argued that the scandals exposed a dangerous lack of regulation in the so-called creator economy, where tech companies profited from people's most intimate content without adequate safeguards. In the UK Parliament faced pressure to investigate OnlyFans' age verification and moderation practices. The European Union discussed new legislation to tighten rules on platforms handling adult material, framing it as a matter of both consumer safety and financial transparency. Across Asia and Latin America, countries watched closely, some imposing outright bans on the platform, others quietly allowing it to operate while preparing potential crackdowns. The cultural fallout was just as complex. For some, OnlyFans remained a symbol of empowerment, offering financial independence to people, particularly women, who might otherwise face limited opportunities. The pandemic-era stories of individuals turning to the platform to pay rent, support families, or escape dead-end jobs still resonated with supporters. Yet the scandals tainted those narratives, forcing difficult conversations about whether empowerment built on systemic exploitation was truly empowerment at all. Advocacy groups argued that while some creators found success, countless others were left vulnerable, underpaid, or exposed to abuse with little recourse. The line between liberation and exploitation became increasingly blurred. For society at large, the scandals exposed the uneasy intersection of technology, sex, and money in the modern age. Could a platform built on monetizing intimacy ever truly be safe? Could regulators keep pace with platforms moving millions of dollars across borders daily? Could banks balance profit with ethics when deciding whether to process payments? These questions had no easy answers, and every stakeholder seemed to interpret them differently. The reputational damage to OnlyFans was undeniable. What once had been celebrated as an innovative model for creators was now frequently mentioned in the same breath as scandals, lawsuits, and investigations. Competitors like Fansly and Just for Fans seized the opportunity to lure away disillusioned creators, pitching themselves as safer or more transparent alternatives. Even mainstream platforms like TikTok and Instagram, while not offering explicit content, began experimenting with ways to let creators monetize directly from fans. The so-called OnlyFans model was spreading, but without the brand that pioneered it. What remained unanswered were the long-term consequences. Would OnlyFans eventually collapse under the weight of scandals abandoned by banks, regulators, and creators alike? Or would it weather the storm, adapt its policies, and emerge stronger? Just another tech giant that survived controversy. Perhaps the most chilling possibility was that the scandals would be forgotten, buried under fresh waves of digital distraction, while the underlying problems persisted unchecked. For millions of fans and creators, the uncertainty carried real human costs. A single account suspension could erase someone's livelihood. A missed flaw in verification could allow another underage user to slip through. A blind eye turned to suspicious transactions could empower criminal groups to continue laundering money. These were not abstract policy debates, they were daily realities for those entangled in the platform's ecosystem. In the end, the global fallout of OnlyFans scandals revealed less about one company and more about the world itself. It exposed how fragile the creator economy is when built on shaky ethical ground, how dependent it is on banks and regulators, and how easily narratives of empowerment can mask exploitation. The unanswered questions remain. Is this the unavoidable cost of monetizing human intimacy? Or is it proof that society still hasn't figured out how to regulate the digital frontier? OnlyFans may continue to operate, adapt, and profit, but its scandals have ensured that the debate over its legitimacy will never truly disappear. The rise of OnlyFans is a story of ambition, innovation, and disruption, but also of scandal, exploitation, and unanswered questions. It began as a promise of empowerment, a platform where anyone could monetize their creativity and claim independence from traditional gatekeepers. Yet the deeper the world looked, the more cracks appeared. Allegations of underage exploitation, the shadow of money laundering, the betrayal of creators, and the fragile dependency on banks and regulators all revealed a far more complex and troubling reality. What makes OnlyFans different from other corporate scandals is the intimacy at its core. This isn't a company selling shoes, phones, or software. It's a platform built on people's bodies, their identities, and their most personal choices. That makes every failure, every scandal, all the more damaging. The fallout is not just measured in dollars or headlines, it is measured in lives, disrupted reputations, destroyed, and trust eroded. And yet, despite the headlines and the outrage, OnlyFans remains alive. Millions of users log on daily, billions of dollars flow through its systems, and creators continue to depend on it as both a lifeline and a gamble. Whether it thrives or collapses will depend not just on its executives or regulators, but on whether society decides this model is worth sustaining or whether it is simply too dangerous to ignore. The story of OnlyFans is far from over. But one thing is certain, it has forced the world to confront uncomfortable truths about money, morality, and power in the digital age. The question now is whether these scandals will bring lasting change, or whether OnlyFans will simply become another empire that thrives in the shadows of controversy. Stay tuned, because the most explosive chapters of this story may still be ahead.